Well, if you guys have low expectations for this show, I would hate to uproot your expectations, but expect higher because we are going to be better than this intro.
Woo! Okay, we got there. Welcome to this week's episode of the 800s. I am your co-host, Alex, and you just heard from my ultra creative co-host, Adam. And thank you to Alan, as always, behind the scenes, making this all happen. We have been experiencing a couple technical difficulties, so we may have to work around them, but we will let you know as they pop up. Hopefully they won't be too intrusive. Anywho, why don't we get into our plugs for the week? Or
Sure
month.
Plugs for the show. If you joined us for our pre-show show, I heard some music that was Fearless First from Incompetech. They have a bunch of cool scores and tunes. You should check them out. Go to incompetech.filmmusic.io to hear more. We post all of our videos on YouTube, and we have our own YouTube channel. You should check that out for past books or other videos that we've uploaded. Link for that is below your video. We are DM's Table on YouTube. If you like audiobooks, like myself, I suggest you check out Audible. Audible has the largest audiobook library of practically anyone. If you want to try them for free for a month, go to dmstable.com/audible, and you'll be able to sign up for a 1-month free subscription. If you would like to learn more about us or other things that we do, check out dmstable.com, where you can find out all the info about everything, including all of the plugs that I've mentioned so far and will continue to mention. We primarily pay the bills with 2 sites, Patreon and Etsy. Patreon link below the video. We're the DM's Table on Patreon. And it's pretty dope options you got there to help us pick books and vote on what books and stuff like that. So you should check it out. Lowest bracket is $2. Etsy, dmstable.com/Etsy for our Etsy page. We sell super cool nerd memorabilia that's 3D printed stuff, so you should check that out. And finally, our socials. We have Facebook and Twitter. On Facebook, we're at the DM's Table, and Twitter, we're at DM's Table. So if you'd like to give us a follow, that'd be much appreciated. And you can keep up to date on all the happenings. And if you would like a more intimate social experience, you could hit us up on our socials for our Discord link and join us in Discord for chats about all things nerdy, not just books. But I think that's about it for plugs.
Yeah, except it's X now. Yeah.
Whatever.
Exactly. Anyways, this week on the 800s, we will be discussing the Polish folklore-based high fantasy novel Uprooted by Naomi Novik. Every 10 years in the small village of Dwernik in the Kingdom of Polnia, there is a choosing whereby the local wizard known as the Dragon selects one of the young women from the valley to take back to his tower as tribute for protecting that valley from the dark magic of the wood. The dragon is known for choosing only the best and brightest girls, so when the self-described, slovenly, and clumsy Agnieszka is chosen over her beautiful and graceful friend Kasia, she is beyond surprised. What she does not yet know is she has been selected for her latent affinity for magic. Once discovered, she must battle the wood alongside the dragon, as well as the greed of the men of Polnia. Her fate, as well as that of the woods and all of Polnia, rests on her decision to remain steadfast and planted, or to be uprooted by the forces around her.
Cool. If this is your first time joining us for the show, I'll give you a quick rundown of how this works. We're discussion. Yeah, VS Jake. We're pretty bad at names on this show, and there's some doozies in this one. So
Oh yeah.
wish us luck. How this show works essentially is we will have a topic to discuss. That topic will come from either myself or Alex or chat. If you have anything you want to talk about, go ahead and throw that in chat at any time, and we'll snag it and throw it out there for everyone to talk about. To give you guys the opportunity to type up your own responses to the topic or question that has been propositioned. Alex and I will go back and forth talking about what we think about the topic of question. And as always, if you have anything that sparks your interest while we're talking, go ahead and throw it in there in chat at any time. And once we're done chit-chatting, we'll check out chat to see if there's anything noteworthy, and we'll talk about what you guys are saying. So yeah, that's pretty much the rundown. We talk about books. That's it.
And as always, a quick little disclaimer: our show does cover adult themes and topics and such. So, and while we try not to swear too much, it does happen from time to time. So, bring kids around at your own discretion. Also, we're trying to create a fun and welcoming community over here at DM's Table, where people can feel free to just be themselves and love what they love and share their passion for things without any fear of judgment or anything like that. So in sum, be nice or fuck off.
Yeah, with that, let's get the conversation started with our traditional question to start things off. What were your first impressions of Uprooted? Yeah.
So I'm
Uprooted.
I'm going to give two very quick first impressions just because I know that I'm the only one, I believe, of like our core three that read the physical book as well as and I listened to the audio, which I believe everybody did. The first impressions of the audiobook is it does take a little getting used to because Naomi Novik, I don't know if it's like her decision specifically, but I have read other books by her, and the audiobooks tend to hire people who are of the culture that the book is talking about. So the accents are pretty heavy, and I know it can take a little while to like adjust to that. And for me, it wasn't a big deal, but I immediately thought, oh, this is going to be something that some people are just not going to be able to get behind, which is unfortunate because despite a kind of slowish start, there's good in it. Like, I felt a lot more immersed when I read it physically, but I would not have been able to know how to be that immersed if I hadn't have heard the pronunciations of all the names and stuff while listening to the audiobook. So the actual voice is good for knowing like how things should be pronounced and kind of getting that into your head as you go. But reading the book, it felt a lot more like sitting around a campfire listening to somebody tell an actual folktale. Like it felt like a story time type of thing, and from somebody's perspective of like having been in it. So so my first impression was like, yeah, it could be in two different ways. It could be hard to get into, but I thought that there was like a certain folksy quality to it that lent itself to some good storytelling, and it was very good about giving you an in-depth look at the character you're starting out with, which lends itself to character growth because you have to know where you're starting to know what changes are being made.
Yeah.
How about you, Adam?
So I did the audiobook. I did not read it physically. I am in the crowd of that was really tough, as Via Strake put it. Part of it is my own personal style of listening to audiobooks. which is I listen while I'm doing other things. And for me, this book was not something that you could do other things while listening to, because it took a ton of attention to keep your mind focused on what was being said and the meaning behind everything. That being said, I tried to separate my opinion about the narration from the actual book. Tried to just think about it from a perspective of how does this book stand up against other fantasy settings and other fantasy stories, stuff like that. And in terms of first impressions, with that in mind, it's got, I think, a good setting startup. It kind of sets the world's pace pretty early on with the medieval-esque setting, and there's magic, but it's kind of like not something that everybody knows about, and it's a far off thing for other people to worry about, not the day-to-day lives of peasants. And I think that's a really good and realistic way to start a book. And I was excited to see where it was going to go and how were going to be introduced into the magic systems, and what exactly was going on with the wood that made it this evil, dark power of unknownitude and stuff. So I'd say it started good. It had an interesting feel to it, and I was eager to learn more.
I like what V.S. Drake said about it having I think a fairy tale feel is kind of a good way of putting it, especially putting together what you said about starting from a commoner or peasant's outlook. Is when you start this book, it feels like this could go either high fantasy or one of those things where all of the magic is just totally explainable stuff. Where it feels like it could be just very real things that are being exacerbated as a part of a folktale, or it could be absolutely high fantasy, and that's one of the things that you get to find out through this book. And you don't have that as a given, which is kind of a fun little treat to decipher as you're going, right? Yeah. At least it was for me. So why don't we go off of what V.S. Drake said about her effectively being a druid? What did you think about the different types of magic that we ended up seeing in this book, or different takes on? What did you think of the different takes on magic that we ended up seeing?
Yeah, I think that was how it was portrayed was a master stroke of literature finesse, because it's totally foreshadowing about the wood being just an unknown entity of some sort of magical nature that they just can't understand. Just like how the dragon can't understand how Agnieszka can do magic that he can't even comprehend, but it's super easy for her as long as she does it her way. Like I thought that was a really smooth way to transition into our reveal about the wood at the end.
Mm-hmm. I agree completely. There's a lot of good magical foretelling, foreshadowing. Sorry, almost lost the word there. Magical foreshadowing. Even when she finds Yaga's book to begin with, right? This idea that magic has more than one nature to it, and subverting expectations of the world around her by picking out the one book that doesn't have the connotations of wizardly magic that has been studied to a science. Very much Via Strike said, like in D&D, it is the difference between a druid or a sorcerer that gets their magic by essentially feel and by the land around them, and a wizard who's dedicated to study and breaking it down like a science. And both seem to have, but I like that both seem to kind of have their place too. Like as soon as this magic that came without having to know everything came around, it wasn't the end all be all. There are other parts that the wizardly magic played, so it didn't feel like her magic was just Deus Ex Machina type of thing, you know, where it was just or Mary Sue or whatever it is.
She had super powerful magic that, in the right application, was like an end all be all, but there were definitely situations where she was like, I don't know what to do.
Yep. Or she knew what to do and she couldn't.
Anything I know to do.
Or she knew what to do, but she couldn't. Like, yeah, V.S. Drake, that lack of training and feeling overwhelmed was a part of it. I did like that her type of magic lent itself to not necessarily having to be well trained, and it made sense, right? Because it was highly intuitive, and going back to the foreshadowing, it's shown from the very beginning that she is an intuitive type of person, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is a good way to segue into V.S. Drake's question. Why don't we put that up as the question for now, is what did you think about Agnieszka as a character?
So I do think things sorry. I kind of changed my opinion of her as the story went along. Because at the beginning I was like, she's kind of being a little like she feels like she's being thrust into a world and isn't ever going to fit in it. But in the end, it was kind of more like she just needed to learn how to shape her place in the world. And I kind of had a problem with it at the beginning, just because she felt kind of like a boring placeholder character. But you know, when she sort of kind of transitioned more into being more assertive and explaining exactly what she wanted to do instead of just going along with everything, you know, kind of made me realize that it was probably intended to be like that. So I liked where she ended up, and I understand where she started after seeing where she ended.
Honestly, I couldn't have put it better myself, really. I like dynamic characters that I don't necessarily have to like them the whole way through, but by the end, I'm invested. I have seen their growth and I appreciate it, whether I like exactly the person themselves or not, you know? And it makes sense for the story, and it absolutely did, because I had kind of the same view of, like, at the beginning she felt less like a main character and more like a lens through which we saw the world, right? She was just a way to focus on stuff in a certain way, and she was that in the beginning, but that wasn't all she was. But she couldn't be more until she had that character growth that V.S. Drake and you were talking about, that assertiveness. Yeah, she did feel like a Watson for a good chunk of it, but she kind of needed to be, because that's, when you think about it, if you grow up in a village of like less than 100 people and all you've known is farming and a terrible woods and some dude known as the Dragon who comes down once every 10 years to steal people away, your worldview is going to be fairly limited. And she has to take in a lot all at once, and it's not something that would just happen immediately, right? Especially not for somebody who, they're in their late teens when this happens. Like, they spent, like, probably 10 plus years believing a certain thing, being told this by everybody around them. And it's understandable later on to have that lack of understanding about the world around her and to resist it, because wouldn't you, if you were thrust into a situation where your whole world is turned upside down, is cling to the things that feel familiar, which is what she did. And she was, the fear felt real. It was kind of tough because you're like, it was hard to see her overcoming that because of how stubborn she was. But it made that growth feel that much more earned when it came, right?
Yeah.
But only because it was handled as well as it was.
Yeah, I agree. She had some good growth in there, and it made her character stand out in a way that I didn't think was going to happen from the get-go.
Oh, absolutely. So I did have, moving on to like maybe some other characters. What did you think of the dragon then, being arguably one of the biggest secondary characters?
I think he was a constant in the story. He was a very old man. Both physically and mentally, I think he was very stuck in his ways. And we don't really see the same growth that we see in Agnieszka in the dragon. In fact, what I personally think what little growth we saw in him reverts at the end, and he ends up going back to how he was at the beginning of the story. Especially considering he fled again and was never to be heard from.
Well, I mean, he was heard from at the very end. And that's where I kind of disagree in that, like, he did have certain things he wasn't willing to give up, but it was stuff that was established in the themes of the book that he was always going to be somebody who couldn't be rooted down. Like, we're going back to the title of this book. Is he was somebody that wasn't a part of the valley. He was always going to be separate from it in a certain way, and he followed what fit that part of his character, whereas but I thought he served as a good foil to Agnieszka, right? He is that constant. He is that benchmark for like where she was to where she ends up. And I thought he did have some growth, I believe, in that he took up responsibility in the capital at the near the end, which is something that I wouldn't have seen his character doing at any point. He does take on that role with that same grizzled old man attitude. Like, that never goes away. But I think there's like that element of an old dog learned a new trick, but he's still the same old dog. Like, it's not going to be nearly the kind of like drastic character growth that we got out of Agnieszka.
Well, I think he went to the capital to run away.
Yeah, that part I agree with. He absolutely was running away from something. He was running away from that idea of putting down roots in a place.
which is the reason why he went to the tower to begin with, to run away from what happened at the capital.
Exactly. Like I said, same old dog, just a new trick is that he comes back every now and again.
VS Drake says he thinks he was a representation of a progressive character that was beaten down by failure. He wanted change as a younger man, but then laid roots, though he never thought he did. Yeah, I agree. He was taken advantage of as he was coming into his prime as a wizard, and I don't think that was something that he was willing to move past. I would say that would be a good example of growth. In the end, he might have been able to set aside the unfortunate circumstances of the first time he tried to cure somebody and was able to finally move past it. But yeah, he was definitely beaten down
Oh yeah.
by his past.
Yeah, thanks for that insight, BS Drake. I hadn't really put it into words, but yeah, now that I see it, it definitely makes perfect sense. You know, you can kind of see it in all of his interactions as he does whatever he can to put distance between himself and other people, whether that's physical distance or personal distance by being a gruff asshole to a girl who is scared shitless and just, which, by the way, that's one of the few things that did bug me in this, but I get there's people out there that are like this, so it's more I was bugged by the character being this way because I don't like these types of people in my personal life. But people who are just mean and don't and like expect you to know shit without explaining a goddamn thing.
Like, I didn't know if I had missed it or if it was him just being an a-hole, but like when he started teaching the main character magic, did he ever tell her that's what he was doing?
Not once.
He was just like, say the word magic.
Well, he wasn't even telling her she was doing it. He was like, she thought he was siphoning power from her to do it himself. And he never once explains it. Not once ever. And like, I think one of the things that ended up doing is lending itself to her, like, emphasizing her intuition towards magic. Like, it was played very well as a part of the story, but his, like, as a character, I'm just like, the fuck are you doing? You want to teach her magic, but you're just yelling at her for not getting it exactly right and saying words she's never had to say before without any explanation. You're a goddamn wizard. Your whole deal is understanding magic at a fundamental level, and you won't explain the basics. But yeah, he is a great example of that, like, typical high fantasy wizard who's been around for 100 years and has no patience for anybody who doesn't know shit he already knows.
That was kind of a funny moment too, when she finally figured it out that she was doing the magic, and then she was like, "Oh, well, this shit doesn't make any sense. It makes more sense to do it like this." And then she's like, "Oh, godly power!"
What, you can't do this? Get on my level.
Anyway, let's talk about less of a question, more of a topic. The title of the book, Uprooted, obviously. Throughout this book, I was astounded by how many different ways this title could apply to the story. I think in terms of picking a title for a book, this is probably the best choice ever for a book. Just because of the vast different ways it was referenced and is applied to the story. I'm curious what you guys think about the title compared to the story, and some interesting insights you might have found in the story that relate to the title.
I would absolutely agree about it being the most, like, fundamentally well woven into a story for a title that I've experienced, at least on this show. And I can't like offhand think of any that are better outside of it, but it's actually one of the things that made it writing my little blurb at the beginning kind of difficult. I like to weave the title in some way, and I was just like, what way do I go? There's so many, but how do I? And what I loved about it is that it didn't make you wait until the end, and it didn't just leave it at the beginning and then just never bring it up again either. It weaves its way in and out from the part where she talks about just being uprooted from her family at the very beginning, from her life as a peasant in a way that she never would have expected, to this fundamental uprooting of a dynamic that had been around in the valley for centuries, to the literal uprooting of trees. And those are just like the big hit you in the face ones. There's a lot more subtle ones that I feel like were in there as well. In particular, I thought with her interactions with the court, right? She is there, like she talks a little bit and alludes to feeling uprooted, just being away from the mountains. Like that little bit is like she's no longer a part of the root of the mountains, and because she's talking about how like the peaks are gone, but she couldn't feel it under her feet anymore either. And I was just like, damn. And I was like, roots of mountains are a thing, and like not being able to feel that under your feet. And it was like little stuff like that, and she just like kind of casually tossed it in here with a little imagery, or something again more hit you in the face, and I thought it was very well done.
Yeah. One of the more subtle ones that I kind of enjoyed is leaving the capital to go back to the forest and the mountains. She uprooted the lazy wizards who refused to leave the capital to go fight the forest in their army. What her intention was to go to the capital and convince them to send an army to fight the wood. And she was unsuccessful, but she still managed to yank them out of the ground and go to the wood despite being unsuccessful about convincing them to do so.
Task failed successfully.
Yeah, pretty much. And then there's the obvious ones about uprooting from the village to go to the tower, and the uprooting her expectations of what the dragon is, and her expectations for her life, uprooting her beliefs in what magic means, what V.S. Drake said about the forest and the evil forest queen. But yeah, it was pretty much well, I guess a broader one that's worth noting too is like up until this timeline of this book, the entire area, the forest and the two surrounding countries were kind of stuck in a stasis of neither one progressing, neither one getting the upper hand. It was just kind of a standstill for centuries. And then, Agnieszka came by and uprooted it all and
turned it on
totally destroyed the status quo.
Exactly. She was a literal force of change, and that's what uprooting is it is an act of change. And that is a theme throughout this entire book. V.S. Drake mentioned the uncovering of the tomb and the dead of the tower people underneath the tower itself and those lands. So uprooting the past and bringing it back into the present. Now it's an excellent title, and I thought it was never there were parts of it that punched you in the face, like, yeah, this is the theme, but none of it felt heavy-handed either, which
Yeah.
is a tough line to ride. You know, like, again, I don't like to do too much comparing of other books, but the last one you read was called Superpowered, and it's they leave it up in the very beginning. They're called powereds, and they're surrounded by supers, and they become supers themselves. It's like, yeah, I get it, and it's throughout the entire thing, but it's just like, it's just kind of left there dangling, and it doesn't, there are dynamics that play into it, but not in the way that is so complex and well thought out as Uprooted. Why don't we go with yep. No, go ahead.
What do you think about Naomi's writing craft? Writing craft. What do you mean by writing craft?
I'm assuming V.S. Drake is talking about just like her writing style and her writing ability in general.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Do you want to start this one? Or?
Yeah. I think she has a pretty good mastery of folksy storytelling. There's a kind of tone to the way that she writes that is homey and comforting while being highly descriptive, and it's more poetic in a way than it is prosaic, but there is enough prose in it to feel, it doesn't feel lofty. It feels like homey and folksy, right? Which again is a tough kind of. I think there's a specific skill in writing in that way. I think sometimes there's a little issue with pacing, but the thing is that when you are storytelling, pacing is not it's rarely going to be as fast paced as if you are writing something that has a lot more, if you're like actually writing something that has a very direct path to what it's trying to do. And so it wasn't bad in the way that it wasn't like slow to the point of being like bad and unreadable, but there are parts where I was like finding myself having to draw myself in, because I was just like, okay, I want to get to know about this part, and you're kind of in this wheel of metaphors and descriptions, ones that I've heard, I know they're important to the character, but I want to know about this thing. But that could just be a me thing, not necessarily a writing thing.
Yeah.
She does a good job with writing characters and making their development feel earned and realistic without, she's not just shoving it in just to have it in there. And I think she did a really good job of world building. Like, she used the bits that we know as just regular people about what it's like being on the edge of a forest in a town, but she did a really good job of making the reader do some of the work in building the world with her, so it feels like shared storytelling in a way that I don't think I would say I don't think we've encountered on the show yet. So if you're not prepared for it, it might throw you off, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think her writing style is well established and shows a a a certain skill with cultural style.
Mm-hmm.
This is an American-born author writing about a culture that she may not have personally experienced. And I think she did a really a really well done job of doing so. Um, I saw some pacing problems that did bother me a little bit, especially at the end. Um, but in terms of storytelling, I think she's got it on lock.
Right. I do believe that I know she didn't grow up in those cultures, but I do believe, if I remember correctly, that one side of her family is like Polish. So like she probably has heard stories like that, but you know, there's a difference between
She's
hearing the
got
stories and being able to actually tell them yourself, right? Like,
Yeah, she has sources to draw upon,
mhm.
but
Yep.
she grew up on Long Island.
The wonders of Google. I only really knew that little bit because I remember vaguely looking it up because I read her book Spinning Silver. And yeah, I would agree with Via Drake. She has a strong grasp on her craft and the understanding on how to write stories. Like, I think that's actually something we don't really encounter enough of. Is there's a difference between writing a good book and telling a good story. Is they
Yeah,
can't there's absolutely overlap there, but they can be different. And I think she is an excellent example of somebody who's found her niche in overlapping the two. Very strong author in her style. Her other book is very much in a similar style with a different backdrop. Uh, and it was good to see that it wasn't like a one-off, you know. And you know, I I really enjoyed reading it, and I'm glad that I read it in both medium. You know, that I experienced it in both mediums too, because yeah, it's a different experience, and that's not something that you get out of every book either. Because I think
yeah,
each medium highlights the notes of the different types of storytelling. Uh, so moving on to another question, I would like to talk a little bit about The Wood. So, what did you think of The Wood and its portrayal?
yeah. That's a good topic to talk about. It was a prevalent theme throughout the book.
Theme and entity and
Yeah.
location.
So I found so I found the history of the wood and its motivation to be predictable. But I didn't necessarily find that to be a problem with the story, that it was a predictable ending, because it was like, I mean, that's a classic story right there of a misunderstood uh, group of people don't get along because they are unable to communicate. You know, somebody treads on somebody's sacred ground and the other person gets super pissed, and then all of a sudden you're at war. And you know, it's a theme that is a classic, and because it's a classic, it is predictable. But I enjoyed the way it played out in this story, and I think the motivations of the wood is something that is very believable and very relatable, and is something that uh, you know, because it's believable and relatable, makes it feel more genuine than if it was just some evil entity that existed in the wood that wanted to do harm.
Yeah, I think you're very right about the complexity given to the wood and its motivations while keeping them very simple and understandable at the same time. There was the wood was at once a literal force of nature and something that was very relatable and human in its origins, right? And honestly, for me, like hearing the story when you finally do meet the Wood Queen and her sister and all of the people of the valley that had become essentially wood people, or honestly, the allusion to elves was not lost on me. They're just elves made of wood, um, like Tolkien style elves. But I thought being able to to humanize it at the same time as treating it as this force of nature that couldn't be reasoned with because it was what it was, and you just have to deal with it as it is and accept that nature creates a conflict both for the main character in what she's going to do, like Neshka's choice between do I just destroy because I can't reason with it, or do I find another way? They use it. Novik used it as a means of creating tension in very visceral ways, with like the descriptions of what the corruption does to people, like that initial description of what happened to the cowherd in her village and even to Kasha is like upsetting. like there's some real what's the one I'm thinking of, the one with the girl who like the horror movie, the one with the girl who's like chained down to the bed and her head spins around, and
I don't know.
blanking on it, but like it's very much like horror movie possessed vibes, and that's very visceral. But then there is something like highly emotional when you get down to the core of it. Like, yeah, you can't forgive the Wood Queen for what she did, but her anger feels justified, especially when you draw allusions to Exorcist. God damn it! Thank you, Alan. Oh my God, I'd feel stupid for that. Anyways,
I don't know what it was either.
brain
Don't feel
no
that
work. So, well, I mean, we're headed into spoopy season, so I should know the shit.
bad. Heading into.
Hey, it's technically Spooktober starts like tomorrow.
In a couple hours.
Yeah, just like 2.5 hours. But the wood was this massive entity made up of many things, but came down to one central being, which, when you think about the nature of forests in general, can very much be the same way. So all of it makes sense in a folktale kind of way, because it's something that I could believe sprang up from somebody's ancient interpretation of what the wood was doing that could have been very natural. But at the same time, when you're in the midst of it, is high fantasy, is fantastical. The descriptions of it range from horrifying to saddening to ethereal and gorgeous. And to hit all of those notes with a single entity, and also to have it be intelligent without knowing where that intelligence comes from, was just chef's kiss for like a villain. Because, you know, who's the real villain? Is it like Rosia? Is it the wood? Is it Merrick? You know,
I think the real villain here is the hatred we all hold within ourselves.
Well, that's honestly, that's not a bad interpretation, which is like the crazy thing. There's so much that you can get out of this, and it all starts with this thing that could have just as easily been the woods out back behind your house, and somebody saw it in some spooky lighting, and it grows into this super complex thing. And like character growth for an entire forest It's pretty dope. Especially and I liked the resolution there. How the queen was laid to rest and dreaming. She wasn't destroyed. The forest was allowed to continue and be healed where it could, and I really did like that ending of Nishka going around and saving people from the trees where she could, or just drying out the heart trees and burning them away in the most careful and considerate manner possible. So, yeah. I agree with you,
she at the end, she finally understood that it was not that the danger wasn't because of some evil. It was because of some misunderstanding that had grown beyond control.
Mm-hmm. It was that, like, unstoppable force and immovable wall type of deal.
Yeah.
They are just things that they had come to a head, and the solution before was to become a part of the wall. And somehow, and to find a creative way to find a different solution in that scenario was, and to make it be satisfying is, like V.S. Drake said, mad props to Naomi Novik on that one.
Yeah.
I will say this: did you have like a sub question to this? Did you have like a favorite manifestation of the wood, or least favorite? I guess.
I forget what they were called. It's been a minute, but the creatures that were the primary workforce for planting the trees.
Oh, the walkers.
Yeah, the walkers. I liked what they turned into in the end.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of felt like the Laputa robots. How they were like, oh, we exist. We're terrifying death machines that let birds grow nests on us.
Well, yeah, they basically become Ents at that point, right?
Yeah.
They're these, gardeners of the forest and caretakers of the trees. And I thought, yeah, I did like them for sure. Honestly, one of my favorites, it's kind of a tie. I did like the actual, the old valley people that had become a part of the forest. I thought that was a really cool thing because of how unique it was. And similarly, I thought the descriptions of the mantises were fucking cool as hell because, like, it's not something you get in a lot of folklore. Like, when there's a bug or a bug type, like, evil, it's usually a spider or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, like, to have mantises be the thing, like, it fits kind of with that description of silvery, sharp, shiny, like, and green all at the same time. Like, mantis kind of fits, and it's not something I would have ever expected. So for scary, I would go with the mantises. For like cool, and I would go with the description of, yeah, the people who become a part of the wood. And to an extent, that would include the queen and Kasha, right? Is because
Mm-hmm.
they had become slightly a part of that, and that description of, like, the fact that you can be a part of the wood was kind of like a cool thing to think about and to imagine.
Woodborn. That was an interesting take on the queen too, with like how she was just an empty shell and the wood could control her after the fact just by putting whatever they wanted in her empty shell
Mm-hmm.
instead of just corrupting her. It's kind of like a you don't really know what's going on here. Just a reminder, I'm not what you think I am.
Well, yeah, and I thought that was like a really clever way of getting around this kind of like mechanic for just figuring out who's infected and who's not, you know? In fact, that's something we typically see more in like sci-fi, when a virus adapts and it's no longer caught by, the scan. Like the eye scan doesn't work anymore because it's moved, like it no longer shows in the eyes, it's adapted or whatever. And
Yeah.
or like this is one that has been like infected in a different way. But to see that used in a magical context was kind of cool too. It was, I was worried it was going to reinforce this idea of like kill everybody who's ever been in the wood. Because humans are panicky dumb animals, as Agent K would like to say.
I mean, to be honest, if they had gone by decree, then a bunch of shit would not have happened.
Well, including figuring out and making it to the core of the wood and dealing with the Wood Queen.
Yeah, who could say what path Agnieszka would have taken from there? But
Yeah.
the if you look at it purely as the wood being able to land a blow against the humans, then it was a pretty significant blow that would have been avoided if they had just followed their own mandate.
Oh, absolutely. It is hard to know where Agnieszka would have gone because honestly, like if they killed Kasha, I could have seen her starting her own villain arc. But I thought that was handled really well, and it just lends itself to the complexity of the wood itself and the villain that it was, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. I think we've got time for one more topic if you've got anything left you wanted to talk about.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
I wanted to talk about what did you think of about who's your favorite tertiary character? Like not the dragon, not the, I guess this would go beyond tertiary, but like not the wood, not Agnieszka, and not the dragon. But who's your favorite character outside of them and why?
Um, let's think.
Do you want? Why don't we go? Because Drake said that they like Kasha, and she was badass after the change.
Yeah. If you've got one, go ahead and talk about yours.
Honestly, I also really liked Kasha because, and I actually didn't mind her like even before the change. She was a character that was kind of put on a pedestal, but she was put on a pedestal by the by Nishka, by the main character. So you kind of get this feel like, oh, she's the golden girl. She is like, and it evokes this idea that that's all she is like she is this person who was prepared to be the sacrifice, and then she wasn't, and you're like, well, what is there left to her? And we find out that even before then that she was a genuinely good friend. She cared about Nishka. She was happy to see her when she came back, even in the midst of like what was going on with the cows and stuff. She was a genuinely complex character that we didn't get to see the real complexity of until after she came back from the wood. And from there, she actually she has her own developing story. She takes on the role of a protector, which she wouldn't have been able to do in the world that she lived in without the powers that she had. And she steps into it so willingly and so well, and in a way that feels like I can respect that that's what she ended up doing with it, because she very easily, given the trauma she went through, could have collapsed in on herself, but instead she stepped up. She continued to be a good friend to Nishka. She ends up being a protector for the two kids at the Capitol and continues on with that, and she can have her own life. And she didn't, while she very much cared for Nishka, she didn't feel like she was only there to be the sidekick. So I really enjoyed reading her bits because she felt like a grounding force.
Yeah. Yeah, Kasha was pretty cool. Especially because, like, obviously we are introduced to her as somebody who is supposed to be the dragon's sacrifice. So her entire life's expectations were uprooted, just as Agnieszka's was. In the exact same way.
Just further evidence. So would you say she is your favorite as well, or was there any bad drink?
I liked that one magic lady who made the sword over more than 100 years to land one single blow and then break. Just because it was like it was like the ultimate loading
that was
screen.
Olosha. That was Olosha.
Yeah.
Like, I believe the sword is actually like her wizard name. But yeah, she was a cool character too. But like, it reminds me of that meme from John Wick, where she is a man of she is a woman of determination, of pure fucking will. Determination, focus, and pure fucking will. And I'm just like, that's definitely her.
It's not that it didn't work, it's just that it didn't work as well as they had hoped. But I mean, it kind of turned out okay anyway. So
I mean, it didn't, I wouldn't say it failed because it created an opportunity that no other thing could have created. Like, there was literally nothing else that could have created that level of weakness in the queen herself. It didn't end everything. It didn't work exactly as advertised, but it worked.
She felt like that character that plays Skyrim and goes, I'm going to save this potion for when I really need it, and then finishes the game with 1,000 potions in inventory.
Shit. What am I going to do with all these potions? Time to start on another one.
Yeah. Good times.
Yeah, that was another kind of cool grounding character that wasn't in there a lot, but like definitely made an impression. I like how none of us mentioned the Falcon, though. He was just like, yeah, he's a dick.
Yeah.
He's a dick. He's around. Yeah, well, yeah, he's basically just a politician with magic. Like,
yeah.
No, yep, yep, he's a wiener.
He was a power hungry douchebag who didn't have the power to back up his desire to be powerful.
Yeah, he had some, he just didn't have enough.
Yeah. I did like that scene when he's trying to break into the tower and the dragon and Agnieszka are sitting inside, letting him try to break in. And then he's like, fuck, damn it! And then has to knock.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That actually did make me like laugh out loud a little bit, like just a chuckle, like, which is pretty impressive. All right. And I know that we were trying to wrap this up, but I have just a quick little question. What did you think about Agnieszka just choosing her own name for her wizard name?
I think that was kind of like a metaphor for she's not really a wizard, she's a druid, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a good way of saying like I don't really belong in your society. I'm just gonna be me.
I would absolutely agree. I had like almost verbatim the same words crossed through my head, but at the same time, I was just like, "Damn, I really wanted to know if she had like a name like the other ones." I also was low key thinking that the thing would say that her name was Yaga,
Yeah.
because Yaga gets mentioned that she time travels like at the very fucking beginning, and she still could be, but like I thought for sure she was just gonna be end up being Yaga. Um,
Yeah, that part kind of never came around again. I was expecting either Yaga to show up and be like, "Let me show you the way," or something, and
or the book to
she never
like be
showed
shunted through time, and she's like, well, now you have to go find it.
up.
No.
She goes back in time
Yeah,
to
that
go
might be one
to
of
go
my
write the book.
only gripes with this book is that like, yeah, it kind of gets resolved when she's like, no, I'm not Yaga, but you might call her a friend. But I was just like, but I want to know about Yaga. And that's like like such a nitpicky gripe that like anyways, why don't we get into final impressions then? Oh yeah, book 2, maybe. um
by the by the
Uprooted in
by,
time.
Baba Yaga is boogeyman. So like that's what it means is boogeyman. So.
Yeah, I'm a. That's actually one of the few like folk tales from that area that I'm actually familiar with, and like considering like her gnarled hair and nature, wouldn't be surprised if she wound up. Anyways,
Yeah.
why don't we get into final impressions then?
Yeah. And while we're doing that, Alex, why don't you check Discord real quick?
Pardon?
You have messages in Discord. Check them.
I do. I don't see any.
Oh, my apologies. I missed your message. I see yours is there.
You have messages.
I have messages.
Yeah, we're there.
Final thoughts. So I liked the story. I thought it was interesting. I don't think it was, one of the best books I've ever read, and the audiobook definitely made it harder to enjoy for me. But I really enjoyed all of the neat little tiebacks to the title and the intricate writing styles that we see Novik display handily in the story. I found the ending to be rushed. There just, in my opinion, there should have been a lot more story between the battle for the tower and the cleansing of the woods. Let's call it that. I felt like a lot of the story revolved around the woods, and we didn't get as much time dedicated to the story about the woods as we did about the story between the dragon and Agnieszka's, what I'm saying, fight against civilization and the corruption that was going on there. But other than that part, I found the story to be thoroughly enjoyable, and I would recommend it.
My final impressions were I wasn't necessarily bothered by the audiobook version of it, but I did have a different experience, that different experience of reading it myself and having it read to me from somebody who was of the region. they are a very different experience. And I honestly, if you can get over the accent part, would recommend both. If you can't, you can absolutely still have fun with the physically read version. Just I would recommend brushing up on your Polish pronunciations of names. Um, Otherwise, that could get frustrating in and of itself. The combination I thought was good. Uh, Overall, I really enjoyed the depth in the characters, the depth of the theme throughout, in the ways it manifested both subtly and more overtly. I thought it was handled really well. The pure storytelling ability shines throughout, and the end to me, while it did feel rushed, felt like it was fitting for a story, because typically a fairy tale or a folk tale, the endings are a bit rushed. It's kind of like you go on this really long journey and then everything has to be wrapped up in this tight little bow, or it's just dealing with the massive fallout of the implications of a bunch of stuff. So it felt fitting, but yeah, there is a bit of a rush quality to it because of the pace that everything else takes throughout the story. And for me, that was kind of, I wouldn't say it was something I disliked, but it maybe could have been handled a little bit better. But that's mostly because I wanted to hear more about the wood witch, Nishka, you know, like her, but maybe that's a time for a sequel. Uh, but the fact that this book left me wanting more, but also feeling satisfied, absolutely would recommend to anybody who loves high fantasy and who doesn't mind getting a little bit out of their comfort zone with naming stuff. Unless you're Polish, then fucking go for it, or Eastern European. No, this was absolutely, in my opinion, fantastic book, and highly recommend. And it sounds like the Peanut Gallery agrees.
Peanut Gallery. Welcome via Strike, a peanut gallery.
Yeah. For those people who don't know, I also read her book Spitting Silver. Very similar tone as far as like storytelling. Also a good book. So that's a personal recommendation to put out there.
Cool.
Also similar pacing, so, but focuses on a different type of main character, which was pretty cool. Anyways,
why don't we talk about what we're reading next, and then we can talk about side pieces, and then wrap it up.
All right.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. October 28th is our next date. So before you go get your candy, come enjoy a show with us. We'll be reviewing Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Gaiman? I don't know how to say his name.
I never knew either, and I've heard it pronounced both ways. So ask Neil, if you're out there and you ever see this on YouTube or something, please let us know how to pronounce your name.
Coraline is a pretty short book, so no excuses. Get it in. And I bet we'll do a little bit of chatter about the comparison between that and the movie, but we probably won't focus on it. After Coraline for November 25th, we have a Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. It's not one I am familiar with. I believe Alex has read that one before. So
yeah, that was my recommendation for books that I am thankful for. I will reveal exactly why on next month's stream. So check it out if you want to find out why I am thankful for this book, and to hear more about it. It's another short one, so a couple easy ones to fit in around some bigger holidays. So please join us.
Yeah.
Anyways, our themes coming up after that, we have as always, we have our redemption arc books for December, and for January, we are going to be going with our New Year's resolution books. So, like, what's a book that you had resolved to read at one point? Like, it was like on your, like, any book that like immediately hit your I have to read this list. And especially if it's one you haven't read yet.
Hmm.
Yeah, so New Year's resolution books. What is your book for the year that you need to read and that you need us to read with you?
Or bucket list, as Via Strake says, bucket list book.
That works too.
Have to check my wish list on Audible and see what's there.
And then choose from the 800 I have listed. No. Yeah, and I do believe for February we'll leave that one for that theme for a little bit. I have a couple I want to choose from, but if you have a theme you want us to do, that's something you can also let us know. Yeah, especially if you join our Patreon. For now, though, why don't we talk about our side pieces? What have you've been reading on the side, Adam?
Well, don't tell the main book, but I have crawled my way back to Brandon Sanderson once again.
No way.
No way. A while ago, Brando Sando released the fourth book in Era 2 of Mistborn. Thanks, Via Strike. That's real nice.
I was gonna call him a Sando slut. So a Sander slut.
I know what I am. You don't need to call me names.
Don't slut shame him.
Anyway,
it's okay.
It's okay.
We're all book sluts. We're all book sluts here.
The Lost Metal came out a while ago, and I have yet to read it. So I'm working my way back through Era 2. I just finished The Alloy of Law, and I'm moving on to the second book soon. So that's what I've been having on the side. What about you, Alex?
I went through and super powered through the super powered series, which is super long. But a fairly decent series for what it is. Like, it's entertaining and hits a lot of cool points. But I would personally recommend it if you read Superpowers with us. It is a big time investment, though.
Yeah.
And I also started reading the 5th season.
What's that one about?
It's one I believe has shown up on our list before. We never got around to, but it's a very popular fantasy book that has been recommended to me a bunch of times. It's book 1 of the Broken Earth series. Basically, it takes place on a planet where there's one mega continent called the Stillness, and it's heading towards a period of instability, but at the center of it is like the one city that actually remains still. But yeah, the 5th season, it's by N.K. Jemisin. Gets a lot of good reviews, and I figured I'd give it a try. It's in like the science fiction, fantasy fiction kind of realm. I'm only about halfway through it, though, so I'll let you know next time where I wind up. Because guess who read and guess who read Coraline early?
Yeah, I already did. I already read it too.
So yeah, we're already prepared for that, and I'm on to the next thing. But I will be joining in the Mistborn rereadings very soon. I want to get through this Broken Earth series, and then that'll be next on my list because it is one of my favorite series from Brandon Sanderson personally. So. Anyways,
yeah, it's the series that really sold his name big time in the fantasy world. So.
Well, I would say it's the one that sold his name outside of the typical fantasy world. Way of Kings, like if you're a true fantasy reader, like that's what really got you. But Mistborn was like both purely Brando Sando, but also mass appeal. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think we discussed that back when we did Mistborn, the original book. So, anyways, with that, Finter, Spummer, Saul, and Scrumples.
He's just screwing around.
I was like, what did I miss? Yeah, it sounds like V.S. Drake's still on that train as well. But with that, I think, well, thank you everybody for joining us. I think it's about time for us to wrap up. We've got some good books coming down the line, so thank you everybody, and we'll see you next book.
Yeah, see you guys next book.